Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Cold Takes. On this week's episode, I'm going to talk about South Park Season 2, Episode 4, maybe Episode 5, Chicken Lover. Let's get this show started. So, as I said off the top there, on this episode I will be discussing the Chicken Lover episode from South Park Season 2. It was actually Episode 3, not Episode 4, like I had originally thought. But anywho, on to the actual episode itself. For those of you who are not familiar with this episode of South Park, or maybe just haven't seen it in a while and have forgotten what it's about, the premise of this is that it is revealed that Officer Barbrady is illiterate and can't read, and therefore he quits his job, but instead of allowing him to quit his job, the mayor decides that Officer Barbrady is going to go back to school to learn how to read. In the meantime, there's somebody going around town raping a bunch of chickens and leaving clues for Barbrady. The problem being the clues he leaves Barbrady requires Barbrady to read books to figure out the clues. And that's how everything all ties together with this episode. Now, this episode starts off with the boys, Kenny, Kyle, Stan, Cartman, on a bookmobile outside of their school, or as it's called in the episode, the Booktastic Bus. The boys in the opening sequence comment about how lame reading is, and then they meet the driver of the Booktastic Bus, who comes across as very super weird and very flamboyant. Anyways, after the boys meet the bus driver, they're even more turned off by reading because of how weird he comes across. And as they're continuing to look through books, there's a chicken noise that comes from outside of the bus nearby. This leads to a cutscene of Barbrady driving around filming a cops documentary. And in this scene is the first, and as far as I know, the only mention of Officer Barbrady having a wife ever on South Park.
Well, being an officer of the peace means a lot of things. It's a hard job, but then again, I'm a hard man. A lot of people think that in a small town there isn't a lot for the law to do. Well, they're wrong.
All units, report to 254 Avenue de los Mexicanos. Possible hostile situation.
There you see? This could be a bank robbery, or possibly even a murder. This ain't no podunk little town.
And Barbrady, your wife called. She wants you to get some pizza on the way home.
So, as they're showing Barbrady driving around, he eventually shows up at the crime scene, and one of the boys, if I remember correctly, I believe it was Stan, finds a note on the ground, but Barbrady can't read the note, so he just makes up what it says, and then he tells the crowd to disperse and makes them leave by threatening to shoot them all in the head if they stick around any longer. We then get Barbrady back in the car with a sequence of him driving around and not being able to read any signs or anything as he passes by. Like, for an example, he drives by a stop sign and it's just a weird language to him. He can't read it. Eventually he stops off at a bank thinking it's a fast food restaurant and orders some food before the person on the other end of the speaker, because it's a drive-through bank, lets him know that this is actually a bank. We then cut to a press conference with Barbrady where reporters are asking him a bunch of questions, and finally, after about 3 or 4 questions, Barbrady finally breaks down and admits that he can't read. He then announces that because of this, he is retiring from the police force, which then cuts to a scene showing a bunch of chaos in South Park as there is now no police officer to keep law and order. Because at the time this episode aired, Barbrady was pretty much the only officer in South Park. Of course, if you're familiar with South Park, the show's expanded so much, and now there's an actual police and detective force there with Officer Harrison. Is it Harris or Harrison? I can't remember exactly. But back in season 2, Barbrady was the only officer in South Park, and with him announcing his retirement, there was scenes of chaos all over South Park. We then cut to the mayor's office, where her aides state that Barbrady will go back to school to learn how to read and solve the mystery of the chicken fucker, as they say. Of course, when they're around the children, they refer to him as the chicken lover. We then get a bunch of scenes with Barbrady in class and at school. A scene with him reading a book report. Another scene with him at recess swinging on the swing set. The boys offer to help Barbrady, and he then proceeds to say, that's right, under Article 39, Section 2 of the South Park Police Code, he's allowed to deputize citizens in a time of crisis. Now, this is why this episode is one of my favorites. It's because of a number of continuity errors in this episode. This episode revolves around Barbrady not knowing how to read. So how the fuck would he know what Article 39, Section 2 of the South Park Police Code said? How would he know that if he couldn't read? Did he have somebody read it to him? It was never explained. Continuity error. There will be more continuity errors in the episode. Obviously, one, as I already mentioned, was Barbrady's wife, because she was never mentioned before, nor has she been mentioned since. There were a couple other continuity errors in this episode. I'll get to at least one more of those in just a moment. We then get another crime scene. The chicken lover has attacked again and has left another note for Barbrady, again telling him a specific book to read in order to solve the clues of the crime. Then there's a couple of scenes with Deputy Cartman arresting people, including one scene where he pulls up to Stan's dad, Randy, and tells him he's going over the speed limit, even though he's exactly at the speed limit. This prompts Cartman to tell Randy to respect his authority. I believe this is the first episode where Cartman uttered the phrase "respect my authority." Anyways, he tells Randy this, and then hits him a bunch of times with the nightstick, and then tells Randy to go to jail. There's also a scene of Cartman going undercover as a hooker as part of a sting operation. A couple of very funny scene sequences involving Cartman here. We then cut back to Barbrady, who's now sitting in a library trying to read, which he successfully does, and he figures out the clue that Chicken Lover has left for him. We then cut back to Cartman again, and he's now at Kenny's house for a domestic abuse call. Now this is where another continuity error comes up. Kenny's parents are in a fight, and somebody called in a domestic disturbance, so Cartman is there, and he's handling that situation when he overhears a call on his police bike alerting him that there is another possible chicken lover attack about to go down. Now, before Cartman leaves, as he's talking to Kenny's parents, we see Kenny in the doorway with his parents. This is crucial, and I'll get to that in a sec. So Cartman hurries off on his police big wheel bike to get to the scene of the crime. We cut to the scene of the crime, and we see Barbrady, Stan, and Kyle at a petting zoo where they catch the chicken lover. And as soon as they catch him, Kenny just happens to be there, even though he was just at his house, and Cartman, who was on his bike, still hasn't made it to the scene of the crime. This is where it's revealed that the chicken fucker was the booktastic bus driver, and he says that this was his plan all along. Or he asks Barbrady how he figured out where to find him, and Barbrady tells him by reading the book that he left for him in the last clue note. Chicken fucker says that his plan worked. He said he was doing this to teach Barbrady how to read. Again, this is another continuity error because it wasn't revealed that Barbrady was illiterate until after the first crime scene, after the first chicken was attacked. So if this was his plan all along, if this was Chicken Lover's plan all along to teach Barbrady how to read, then what's the explanation for the first attack? So there's at least 4 continuity errors in this episode, which again, I actually like the continuity errors. I find them a little bit enduring, and that's why this is one of my favorite episodes of South Park. After Chicken Lover reveals that his plan was to rape chickens in order to teach Barbrady how to read, Cartman finally shows up at the scene of the crime, even though Kenny's already been there for a couple of minutes. This was probably the biggest continuity error in the show, but again, it is what it is, and it's part of why I love this episode. Cartman and Barbrady then bludgeon the Chicken Lover to death, and the show ends with a parade for Barbrady in honor of him learning how to read and capturing the Chicken Lover. And Barbrady states that reading sucks ass, and after reading Atlas Shrugged, he is now never going to read again. So, anyways, I think this was a fantastic episode of South Park. A lot of continuity errors, as I've already mentioned, and one of my favorite early episodes of South Park. Obviously, as the seasons have progressed, they've gotten better and better. But as far as early season episodes go, this is definitely one of my favorites. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening and watching this. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in a week with another topic. Alright, bye.